It's Don Dokken, and you're listening to Sonic Dorms with D Fantastic.
You have a new album out. It's been a long time coming. I've waited about 5 years for the record. It's called Heaven Comes Down. What inspired you to take that title from the Tooth and Nail album, really from a track on that, and utilize it for what you're now calling your final album, your final Dokken album, really?
Yeah. I've always had a habit, back in the day, I was always the one that named the records. We had Tooth and Nail and Back to the Attack and Long Way Home, Lightning Strikes Again, Hell to Pay. A lot of these titles I'd come up with would be from former songs from previous records. And I thought, what do you want to call it? Dokken 13 but what's going on in the world right now with the Israeli war, the Hamas crazy bastards, and Putin, and Kim Jong-un, all the rioting going on, homeless people on all the streets all over the country. And I thought it kind of feels like heaven's coming down to straighten shit out. So I said, let's call it Heaven Comes Down because, we all know if you watch the news, the world's a mess right now. I mean, I'm honestly not paranoid, but Iran's getting in the mix and they've got, almost there to make a nuclear bomb. So I'm like, it could end any day, man. So I watch the news every night for half an hour, then I say I've had enough. And I told the band, Heaven Comes Down is appropriate.
Fantastic. You know what it reminds me of, Don? It reminds me of another song that it's one of my favorite melodies that you ever had participated in. It's a track from the Under Lock and Key album. It's a deep cut called Will the Sun Rise. Kind of reminds me of what you were speaking about on that track in particular. It's funny how that song, in a lot of ways, has stood the test of time because it's almost as relatable, or as relatable as it was back in 1985.
Yeah, when we did Will the Sun Rise, I mean, as usual, our world was a mess. And, the lyrics are about, will we get nuked tomorrow? Will somebody drop a dirty bomb? Will the sun rise? Will it's over? Will the sun rise? Will there be a sky? Only one thing, left, da, 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 da. And yeah, the Will the Sun Rise was about, somebody ended it all. And then now you fast forward 25 years and it's all happening all over again. And it's disappointing to me that, we have, a billion trillion people on this planet. You would think by 2023 or 4, we'd be a little more, we'd be a little more enlightened. That was my manager. We'd be a little more, enlightened. But with the Hamas and the Israelis at war, you got the Ukraine against the Russians. Every time I go to LA, now that I've moved to New Mexico, even here we have homeless people. And I go to LA and I just see people sleeping on the streets. And
my apologies if we're jumping around here, but you brought up the Scorpions now, and I gotta tell you, a lot of what I fell in love with your voice, the vibrato in your vocal, that signature vibrato of yours, to me, it always reminded me a bit of Klaus's voice. This is similar vibrato, at least to my ears. Was he an influence on you vocally?
He was a total influence on me. And when Dieter Dierks was producing Blackout, we were playing at the Whiskey and he came to see us and he said at the show, Don, I don't like your band. I'm like, oh, that hurt. And he goes, but you sing with a lot of vibrato and you have a lot of that Klaus influence. And Klaus had just had his surgery on his voice and he was resting and he had these electrodes. And he asked me if I wanted to come to Germany and sing all the high stuff. And, at that time in my life, I was really young. My voice was like a virgin. It was crystal clear. I had a shitload of range. And I said, hell yeah, I want to sing on a Scorpions album. So that's how it started. I went to Germany and sang just the very, very highest notes, like on Give Me All I Need, No One Like You, Dynamite, songs like that.
Can we still hear? Because I've gone out of my way to listen to Blackout several times and try to hear, because you're credited for doing backing vocals on it, on the record. So is that
Yeah.
something that, because I've tried really hard, I'm going, I got to hear these backing vocals, but and I can hear there's something happening there, and it's fantastic because I think it adds an extra something to the record that I personally, I mean, maybe I'm a little biased because I've always been a fanatic of your voice, but I love the fact that that's a great piece of history right there. It's I'm sure it was a great honor to have recorded alongside the Scorpions.
I was very grateful. And, Dieter wanted to have that super high, what they call a tension note, but they didn't want beat Klaus up. He wasn't supposed to be talking, singing, doing anything to rest his voice. And, here I'm in my 20s. I hadn't done 10 world tours. My voice was perfect. And I said, I can hit those notes, no problem. As I did in Dokken days, I hit those B flats above A on Kiss of Death, Lightning Strikes Again, Tooth and Nail. I'm husky today because I went out and loaded a bunch of wood into the house and it was 32 degrees. I got a little bit of a cold, but I said, hell yeah, I'll fly to Germany and sing on the Scorpions album. And it was a great honor. And they credited me, and I'm happy and I'm grateful. And we talked about it for years. For many years, the Scorpions said, no, Don didn't sing on the record and blah, blah, blah. And then I felt like an idiot. But what happened was I was in the studio singing the backgrounds, and some journalist showed up at Dirk Studios and saw me in the control room singing. And they went, oh, they're getting a new singer, this guy from America, Don Dokken, and, we didn't talk much. And I finally pulled Klaus aside one day and I just said, I want you to know that that journalist is full of shit. And I'm just here to help out, man. And I told Klaus, I remember it like it was yesterday, having breakfast. And I said, Klaus, if they asked me to join the Scorpions, I would have said no. Because Klaus Meine is the sound of the Scorpions. He is the guy. I said, I can't imagine me singing in Scorpions. I would have said no, even though it would have been a great honor. I said, I just want you to know, whatever people are talking about, no, I would never join the Scorpions. You are the Scorpions, in my opinion.
Yeah, to me it seems like you were just, as you mentioned already, you were very gracious for the opportunity, and to say the least, and that's a beautiful thing. Don, you had mentioned earlier something that caught my ear, and it got me wondering if, in your mind, back when you're thinking, you had a vision for your band, what were you thinking of as far as what the perfect version of your band would have been had it not been with George or Jeff or Mick? In your mind, what were you envisioning as your band in the most perfect of ways?
Well, I didn't have a vision, honestly. I got a record deal in Germany. I had no band, and I signed to Carrera Records. And he said, you got 3 weeks to make a record. I think we got $8,500 from my publishing, and they own the rights to everything. And I said, well, that's $70 more than I have right now. So the problem was I didn't have a band. I didn't have George. I didn't have Jeff, Mick. They had nothing to do with the record deal. They signed me as a solo artist. And if you look on the internet, you'll find the original album cover says Don Dokken, and I'm chained up. So I knew about George. I knew about Mick. We'd played many shows with them on the Sunset Strip when they were called the Boys. So I just called Mick. Honestly, I wasn't looking for a guitar player because I was a lead guitar player and lead singer. And I said, do you want to come to Germany and as a session cat and play the drums? And he's like, sure, great. I'm getting kicked out of my condo tomorrow. I'll come. And he said, what about George? And I said, George is great, man. George is amazing. He was kind of like on that tier of Eddie Van Halen, Randy Rhoads, George Lynch. And I said, well, maybe, I don't know, So I flew them to Germany. We rehearsed for a couple of weeks, wrote the record, did it. They left. They went back to LA. And I woke up one day and they'd left. They left the hotel. I was like, what do you mean they left? The album's not done. It's only 2/3 done. So I had to finish the guitar parts and some of the solos by myself. That kind of pissed me off. But Mick's always been a follower when it came to George. They grew up together in high school. So of course, the album took off in Germany. I don't have a band. So I come back to LA and to do showcases for labels. And I called George and Mick and got Jeff in the band Jeff at the last minute. And we showcased and got a record deal. And then a week later, our managers, Cliff Bernstein, said, I got you an arena tour, 10,000 people a night, opening up at the bottom. It was Blue Jacob, Aldo Nova, and us. And I said, you guys want to do this tour? Yes or no? You're playing bars for 50 people. You're playing clubs. Or do you want to play in front of 10,000 people? So that's how it all started. And then we finally did a band agreement. And I wanted to make it simple. So I always split everything 4 ways. So Mick was the luckiest guy because Mick didn't write. And he made millions. But, there was a lot of bad press. George said, Don left the band because he's greedy. He's getting all the money. And I'm like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Every dollar I make, Jeff makes, George makes, Mick makes. It was a 4-way split, man. It didn't matter who wrote the songs. And to be honest, I kind of made a deal with the devil because, I wrote most of the hits and I gave up 75% of everything. The whole record, they got 75%. And that's how it started. But I didn't have a vision, I would say. I was just wanting to play. I'd already done 2 tours in Germany long before George and Jeff and Mick. I did a tour in 79 with Juan Cruci on bass, and Juan sang and I sang, and we had a drummer, Greg Pecca. It was a 3-piece. So I don't know what they always went on about I was, a Nazi and I was greedy, and it was a 4-way split, man. But, we never talked about that publicly because it's legal shit, And as we kept going, getting more and more and more famous, I thought, well, this will ease the tension between George and I. But it didn't happen. George and I just didn't get along from the day he joined the band.
So simply put, you just wanted an outlet to write songs, to perform. You didn't know exactly what that would be, but like you say, you didn't really have a vision for that. But you just wanted that outlet because you are ultimately a songwriter, a guitar player, a vocalist.
Correct. And I needed a drummer and I needed a bass player. And, I didn't have a band, that's why the album's called Don Dokken when it came out. I just wasn't thinking about, this is my vision of a perfect band. These are the guys I want in the band. As everybody knows, historically in the press, George came, he left. He came, he left. I mean, he quit the band like 4 times. And it was frustrating for me, George be in, he's out, he's in, he's out. He's going to play with Ozzy. He didn't get that gig. Now he showed back up at the Whiskey, and I had Warren D. Martini on guitar for a short time because he was great and he was young. And I remember singing at the Whiskey, looking in the audience and going, what's he doing here? And he kind of pulled Warren aside, who was like 19 years old, and said, you don't want to play with Don, you just don't do it. He's you just don't want to play with him. He's too hard to deal with. And Warren decided to go with Rat. And that's the end of it.
Yeah, Don, I mean, we only have like a couple minutes left. I definitely wanted to say, ask you one more thing. What's the greatest song that you feel you've ever written? Because to me, there's so many that I personally admire that I think you really put your, I mean, I'm sure you put your heart and soul into everything you've ever worked on, but songs like Winsome Nights, A Thousand Miles Away, I mean, Crash and Burn, songs like, When Heaven Comes Down, of course. I mean, there's some great songs that I consider to have some of the best melodies I've ever heard. What's the best song you consider your grandest achievement as a singer-songwriter?
It's a hard question to answer. I really loved Too High to Fly on Dysfunctional because it was very out of the box, Too High to Fly. I was kind of doing a Jim Morrison kind of a thing, and I'm kind of talking. And we sold our sons and we sold our daughters. Pretty soon, gold was water. It was very undockeny, but I really love that song. We still play it live sometimes. My dilemma is now that Heaven Comes Down's coming out, and we literally have 90 minutes of all hits. So, what do we get rid of? Into the Fire, Just Got Lucky, It's Not Love, Breaking the Chains, Alone Again, The Hunter. I don't know. So we've been talking. I go, we're going to have to get rid of some of the hits. And we understand that the fans will be hearing these songs for the first time, and they might be going like, what's this? I remember I went to see Iron Maiden 15 years ago, and they had just put out a new record. And I went to see them at Irvine Meadows, and they only played the new record. And I could see the fans were disappointed. They weren't doing Run for the Hills, and I thought, ooh, I don't know, that people didn't know the songs. They just played the whole album start to finish. And then they came on an encore and did a couple of their hits. So it's been a dilemma and a blessing that I have written a lot of hits. And it's like, if I asked you and said, should we get rid of Into the Fire and play Fugitive? Or should we get rid of It's Not Love and play Gypsy? Or should we get rid of The Hunter and play Over the Mountain? It's a hard decision. So I think we'll just go on tour. We leave next Tuesday, our last 6 US shows. And I just think we'll just have to play the new songs. And if the fans embrace them, God bless them. And if they don't, they don't, And that's kind of the dilemma we have right now, which is a good dilemma. A lot of bands in the 80s had 1 hit, 2 hits, and they warm up for us and they play the 2 hits. And I look in the audience and they play the other 7 songs, and everybody's going like, what's this? They don't recognize the songs because of what I call them B tracks.
Yeah, I mean, you got those. There's always those deep cuts that I think I guess the super hardcore Dokken fans would be familiar with, such as myself. So if you
And
threw
they
out
just,
something like Bullets to Spare, I'd go, oh great, But
oh, that'd be cool. I got bullets to spare.
yeah,
It wasn't a big hit. We never made a video, but there's so many songs that I've written, by the grace of the universe that comes to me. People ask me, how do you write? And I say, I get up in the morning, I have my energy drink. I'm on a new kick now. It's called Morning Kick. And it was developed by the karate guy. Shit, can't remember. Famous karate artist who won the gold medal back in the 70s. And he came up with this new powder, and you take it and you get energized, pure vegetables and Ashinawanga and spirulina. So I start my day with that. And I start, my interviews. I mean, my interviews start at 11 in the morning till 5 at night. And it's a little daunting. But right now, now that the record company said, we delivered this record a year ago, dude, a year ago. And I was like, it's like having a baby. I'm like, let the baby come out, man. Let's go. And the label said, you can't play any new songs off the record. Don't talk about it. And I said, why? And then he says, because some idiot in the back row with an iPhone is going to record one of your new songs. It'll be on the internet tomorrow. It sounds like crap through their telephone. And people are going to go, oh, that's a new Dokken song. Sounds like shit, you know? So we haven't played any of the new songs yet. Right now, I have 5 more days for the tour, US tour ends, and we're trying to figure out what songs we play off the new album, like Over the Mountain or Gypsy or Fugitive, because they're out on video. But we're gonna have to ditch hits. It's like Over the Mountain, Into the Fire. Fugitive, just got lucky. I mean, we're still playing Breaking the Chains, my first hit that I wrote in 1981. And I always am amused when I look off the stage and see young kids in their early 20s and they're singing all the words to Breaking the Chains. And I'm like, holy shit, man. I wrote that song when I was 23. So do we get rid of it, Breaking the Chains? Do we get rid of Tooth and Nail? Paris is Burning. So it's going to be an experiment these last 6 shows. And then we take a break and we go to Europe. As you probably heard on my phone call, my manager, the Scorpions are doing a residency in Vegas again for 5 weeks. And I'd love to warm up for the Scorpions. All my peers, my band, other bands always say, how come every time Scorpions comes to the West Coast, you guys always open up? And I said, because we're bros, man. I call Rudy, I call Klaus. We warm up for Scorpions because our music is very similar. My vibrato and they always say, you know, how come you guys always get to open up for the Scorpions? What's the end? And I said, well, because we're friends, you know. And so we'll see what happens. I'd love to do the residency in Las Vegas. Like you just heard my conversation, I'll be calling them today. Mickey D just called me last night. He's on tour with doing a thing called Mickey D and Friends. So they're doing Motorhead, and they're doing all the Motorhead songs, and it's selling out every night with Mickey D, because obviously he was in Motorhead after Dokken, and then he joined the Scorpions. So we're just trying to move forward. You know, our European tour is booked. I'm looking at it right now, and I'm like, I've never played these countries. Hungary, Sweden, Czech Republic, Belgium, you know, it's like, wow. So it'll be an interesting tour to play these countries we've never played before. And I'm hoping that those countries are turned onto the record and they'll be a little more forgiving if we just don't do all the hits.
I say this is great material, Don. I love every track on here, including Santa Fe, the closing track. That's probably the one that I personally admire the most. But every song's got a great hook on it. I love the fact that you tell it how it is. You've always told it how it is. Just garnering from every interview that I've ever watched or read of yours. That's one of the things I admire the most about you. And of course, you're just an incredibly talented individual. So I'd like to say thank you again, Don, for taking the time to do this with me and for being patient, because I know I was having technical issues earlier, but it means a lot to me, Don.
No worries, mate. Yeah, that's been a problem that ask the same questions and stuff like that. And my girl always says, you know, be careful what you say, be careful what you say. It's going to end up on blabbermouth and going to take it out of context. But I'm the kind of person that just talks honestly and openly and talks about my good times and my bad times. And, you know, I just the way I am. I can't edit myself when I'm talking to you. I just talk to you like a person, and I'm a person. I honestly, it sounds egotistical, but I don't see myself as a rock star anymore. I just see myself as a musician that's been very blessed to have such a 40-year-long career. I talked to the Scorpions about that, you know. I remember 10 years ago, and I was telling them I was going to retire, and they said, why are you going to retire? You're only 60. And I said, I think it's time to stop. And they were telling me, no, Don, you keep singing until you can't sing anymore and you can't do it anymore. And they kind of kept me going. But I have that addiction that I have to play guitar. I have to write lyrics. I can't help it. Every day I just write, you know. And unfortunately, with this happened, you know, my hand's paralyzed now. There's my good hand, and there's my bad hand. The whole arm is paralyzed. So that's kind of put the kibosh on my career. That's why I'm telling everybody this is our last record, because I can't play guitar. I can't play piano. I can't play bass. I can't play drums. My whole arm is this, just nothing. It just does this. So it's been very depressing these last couple of years. And we fought and fought and fought for John Levin and I to get this record done. And people will notice when they buy the record, I tried to make every song a story. You know, notice that?
Yeah.
Not just you left me, I miss you, once you come back to me. That was my go-to in the 80s. Now it's Gypsy, and Over the Mountain is a metaphoric song about you got to fight in life. You got to climb the mountain to get to your Shangri-La, to get to the top of where you want to be. That's what that song's about. Fugitive came out of just the band coming up to my villa up here in a mountain at 8,000 feet, no houses around me, 25 acres, thousands of trees. And they said, boy, you really are a fugitive after living in LA your whole life in Beverly Hills. And I said, oh, fugitive. Fugitive from life. That's a good idea for a chorus. And that inspired me to write Fugitive. That's the way my brain works. And then Gypsy, they said, man, there's a lot of Native Americans up here in New Mexico. We see old women dressed like gypsies. And I went, oh, I think I'm going to write a song called Gypsy, you know? So I write now more from what I see in life, not in LA when you're surrounded by four walls and surrounded by four walls and you're in a studio and you're writing, and it's not that inspiring sometimes, you know? Usually I would write my songs on a little 4-track recorder and write this. I wrote in my dreams in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, drunk on tequila, sitting on the beach with my acoustic guitar. And I was annoyed because there's these seals going, and I'm telling them, shut up. I'm trying to write a song here, will you? You know, and I wrote in my dreams, you know, in a half an hour. And the final thing I'll say is I'm just grateful that we played 3 weeks ago. We had like 6,000, 7,000 people. And I see 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 60-year-olds. And I meet these people after the show, the meet and greets we do now. It's a new thing. And I ask them, how I saw you singing Into the Fire. You weren't born yet. And they say, our parents passed our record collection down to us. And then we got to be 12 or 13. We wanted to see Dokken, but you guys broke up in 88. So I never got to see you, damn it. And now we're in our 20s, we can go see Dokken, finally. And I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. You know, they had to get old enough to go to a concert. So I'm very grateful that the fan base is from 20 to 67, you know. So I'm very grateful. And it's a bummer this will be our last record, but what can I do with this? I can't play guitar. I got John, you know, and John writes great riffs and I'm writing the lyrics. And it was a tragic thing in my surgery that they paralyzed me. So I had a fit, like I tell myself, I played guitar for 50 years. That was a good run.
Would you consider, Don, ever writing a book and going on maybe like a book tour? Because you have all these stories and you're such a great storyteller. And to just end with one more record, of course, it's an honorable thing to do, of course. And considering your what you've been through, of course, it makes perfect sense. But it'd be nice to still have you out there in some kind of way.
I'm going to keep playing till I can't play anymore.
All right.
Have told a few stories about my childhood, you know, that I lived in an orphanage. Then I was in foster homes. I didn't have parents. My dad was in Korea War. My mom was in a mental hospital. I'm pretty honest about everything. And I've had offers for years to write a memoir and everything. But even when I toured with Queensryche several years ago, and I played acoustically, that started the whole problem. My fingers weren't working. And I tell stories. This song is about this. This song is about that. This song is about that. And people go, oh, I didn't know that. I thought it was about this. And Into the Fire is about going to hell. And I said, no, actually, I was sitting at a girlfriend's house and I had a shoebox of a bunch of Polaroids of my ex-girlfriends that shouldn't be seen by anybody. And I thought, boy, my kids are getting older. If I die and they find this box of all these chicks naked in my bed, it probably won't go down well. So I was taking the pictures and throwing them in the fireplace. I go, my kids don't need to see this if I drop dead. So, and I'd look and I go, oh, I remember her. Wow, she was beautiful. And I remember her and she was beautiful. And I just started throwing the pictures in the fireplace. And the girl's house I was at, she goes, what are you doing? I said, I'm getting ready my past. This is my past. I don't want to see this anymore. And I'm throwing them into the fire. And I went, into the fire. That's a good title for a song. And that's all these weird inspirations when I write songs.
Fantastic, Don. It just goes to show you can get inspiration from anything in life and turn it into an incredibly awesome song, to say the least. But Don, thank you again for taking the time. I know you're a very busy man. You got a lot to get to, and I really appreciate your time. And I respect you so much. Really, I appreciate. As you can probably tell, I'm 30 years old, going on 31 tomorrow, and it's my dad who basically was like, "This is the record collection." Didn't force it on me, but my ears always had that ability to click when I heard something that I really could groove to, something that I really understood, something that I really could connect to. And your music, the melodies specifically of your songs really are something that I gravitated towards early on. So your music will forever be a part of me in a lot of ways. So I appreciate you
Thank
for that
you.
alone.
And
Thank you.
I've always been about the melodies. I'll tell you a quick little story. When my son turned 15, Tyler, he called me one night and he was going through my record collection. He goes, Dad, I found this record. And there's this really cool song on it called Communication Breakdown by a band called Led Zeppelin. Have you ever heard of them? And I went, yeah, Tyler, I've heard of Led Zeppelin. It was been in my record collection, and he discovered Led Zeppelin. And then I slowly kind of guided him to the Beatles album. So that was kind of cool. Like you said, your parents passed down your CDs, your vinyl, and you put them on and you go, wow, that's a cool song. The first, Black Sabbath album and or this album. And now this whole new generation being turned on to music.
Yeah, it's amazing. And we need that. And part of why I started doing this is to hopefully inspire others to listen to artists, young and old, those that, to me, out of respect, I feel deserve their music out there to be carried on into the future. So building this thing up gradually, but hopefully can get some more people into this sort of thing. And I appreciate
It
you,
takes
Doc.
time.
Again.
Yeah, it
Thank you.
takes time to spread the word. I am not crazy about internet bands that film their videos on an iPhone, and I was doing a little binging, and I'm like, man, these songs are awful. There's so much crap out on social media, and I'm like, people need to go back to the roots of the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Sabbath. I hope that the younger fans go back and listen to where all these bands now took their influence. Because in my personal opinion, I don't give a damn about the Taylor Swifts and the hip hoppers. It's just not my thing. I'm not knocking her. She's selling millions, but I want people like you and people to go back, and listen to Zeppelin and listen to the White Album and listen to the first Black Sabbath album and listen to the first Metallica album. I hope on social media people will kind of go back and not just listen to what's the flavor of the week because Taylor Swift got 2 million hits. To me, that's just vanilla. She's just vanilla pop music. Doesn't speak to my soul at all. She's just cute.
Yeah, well said, Don. I appreciate you again. And if you haven't already, by the way, Don brought up the Beatles. Have you checked out the new Beatles track that was released
Everybody's
yesterday?
talking about it. I want to hear it, that they put John's voice in AI, artificial intelligence, and flew him in and adjusted his vocals and put the song in. What's it called?
It's called Now and Then. And what they did is they were able with AI to separate the track because his vocal and piano part were on a single track. So now they were able to separate the vocals and the piano and complete the song.
Wow, talk about technology. Uh, then now I have to go look for it now and then.
Now and then. And there's a music video out that was released today, directed by Peter Jackson. It's actually brilliant because they utilize clips from both that from the archives from Apple, as in Apple recordings, from archival footage that we've never seen before from '95, from the early '60s, from when Paul and Ringo went in recently to finish recording the parts. So it's a big tribute, really, to the Beatles' legacy. So I suggest you check the video out as well.
I will do it right away. The most famous person I ever met in the world was George Harrison.
It's beautiful.
And I had this beautiful memory that I had 2 acoustic guitars in my trunk at a party up in Malibu. And they said, "Oh, Don's a guitar player." And George says, "Oh, you want to jam?" And I was like this. I was awestruck. Then I understood why fans do that to me when they go, and George and I went out on the edge of a cliff. The sun was going down. You could see the ocean. It was like a movie. And George and I jammed. He was going through his cancer treatment. And I have this beautiful picture of Tommy Chong, George Harrison, and myself. And we all had grown beards. We looked like a bunch of hippies. And that's like such a fun memory of meeting George. And then I saw him 2 months later in the studio. He was trying to organize all his music. And I walked in and I just went, "Ooh, sorry." I didn't knock. And I walked in and George was in there with Win Davis at Total Access Studios because it was down in Redondo away from the Hollywood scene. And that's George Harrison. But I understand now when I got famous, when fans walk up and go, and I'm like, "Yeah, spit it out. What do you want? Autograph with picture?" Because they're, a little awestruck from fame. But meeting George Harrison was just a wonderful memory in my life. So I will definitely, as soon as I'm done with this interview, I got one more to go. I will go on YouTube and check out Now and Then.
Fantastic, Don. And on that note, check out Heaven Comes Down out now. Buy
Yeah.
it because to me it's worth buying, okay? And I like buying my music. So I've got mine coming in the mail. Should be here in a couple days. We're looking forward to it on CD. So
You're gonna love it. You're gonna love it. It's a classic Dokken sounding record. I can't find one song in that record after finishing it a year ago that I think, maybe that song wasn't good enough. Every song in that record is great.
great stuff, Don. Thank you again. And seriously, best wishes to you as always. Looking forward to maybe seeing you on the road one of these days. Best wishes to you. Thank you again for being having such a huge presence in my life as a singer-songwriter.
God bless you. Blessings. Have a great day.